Dr. Marcus Reed was having what he considered a perfectly reasonable Tuesday morning on Harmony Prime Station, which meant he was drinking his third cup of coffee while glaring at the latest bureaucratic memo about interspecies medical cooperation protocols. The coffee was terrible. The memo was worse, and Marcus was seriously considering whether early retirement to a nice quiet farm planet might be worth the pay cut. Then his communicator decided to ruin everything with the most panicked alien voice he'd ever heard. Dr. Reed, emergency in Medical Bay 7. We need you immediately. It's a code red situation. Marcus set down his coffee with the careful precision of a man who knew this was probably the last peaceful moment he'd have today. Let me guess, Nurse Pippin. Someone brought in a wounded butterfly and the entire medical staff is having collective anxiety attacks? No, sir, it's much worse. It's a... The little Flickian's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. It's a predator, sir. Now that was interesting. Marcus had been the station's resident veterinarian for 3 years, ever since the brilliant minds at Galactic Medical Administration decided that having one human around might be useful for dealing with the more challenging patients. What they'd failed to mention in his job description was that 90% of the galaxy's sentient species had evolved from prey animals, which meant their idea of a challenging patient was anything with teeth sharper than a butter knife. What kind of predator are we talking about here, Pippin? A Varaxian, sir, a big one, with wounds, and it keeps making sounds. Marcus actually perked up a bit. He'd read about Varaxians in his xenobiology texts, massive wolf-like creatures from a high-gravity world, apex predators with the kind of pack mentality that had helped them conquer half their solar system before they developed space travel. They were supposedly intelligent, honorable, and, according to the cultural exchange programs, surprisingly fond of bad poetry. All right, I'm on my way. Try not to let anyone die of fright before I get there. Too late for that, sir. Dr. Quillix already fainted twice, and Technician Bloop is hiding in the supply closet. Marcus grabbed his medical bag and headed for the door, mentally preparing himself for what was undoubtedly going to be the most entertaining medical emergency he'd dealt with since that incident with the Zephyrian ambassador and the allergic reaction to artificial gravity. The thing about working on a multi-species station was that you quickly learned to appreciate the absurdity of the universe. Here they were, representatives of dozens of advanced civilizations, capable of faster-than-light travel and quantum computing, and most of them would rather face down a black hole than a mildly irritated house cat. Marcus had grown up on a farm in Nebraska, back when Earth was still considered a backwater planet full of crazy primates who kept dangerous animals as pets. He'd spent his childhood wrestling with cattle, his teenage years dealing with injured wildlife, and his veterinary training learning that the secret to handling any animal was a combination of confidence, common sense, and the willingness to get bitten occasionally. Apparently, this made him uniquely qualified to deal with the galaxy's dangerous patients. As he walked through the station's corridors, Marcus could already hear the commotion echoing from Medical Bay 7. It sounded like a combination of panicked alien chittering, medical equipment being knocked over, and what he was pretty sure was someone crying. Just another day at the office. Medical Bay 7 looked like a disaster zone. Equipment was scattered across the floor. 3 diagnostic screens were flickering ominously, and there was what appeared to be a Quillex-shaped hole in the wall where someone had tried to burrow through solid metal to escape. The entire medical staff was clustered in the far corner of the room, peering around furniture like they were watching a particularly terrifying horror movie. And there, on the largest surgical table the station had, was the source of all this chaos. Marcus had to admit Fang was impressive. The Varaxian was easily 8 feet long from nose to tail, covered in dark fur that looked like it could stop a plasma bolt, and even unconscious he radiated the kind of presence that made your hindbrain start screaming about running away very, very fast. His wounds were nasty too, multiple energy burns across his flank, and what looked like shrapnel embedded in his shoulder. Okay, Marcus said, setting down his medical bag with deliberate calm. So what's the problem? Dr. Quillex, the station's head physician, poked his feathered head up from behind an overturned cart. What's the problem? Dr. Reed, that creature is a killing machine. Look at those teeth, those claws, those eyes that keep opening and staring at us. As if on cue, Fang's eyes cracked open, revealing yellow irises that seemed to glow in the medical bay's lighting. A low rumble emerged from his chest that was probably just unconscious breathing but sounded suspiciously like a growl. Half the medical staff immediately dropped to the floor and started making what Marcus assumed were prayers to various prey species deities. His name is Fang, Nurse Pippin squeaked from underneath a medical scanner. He told us before the sedatives kicked in. What kind of species names their children Fang? The kind that probably finds your species' naming conventions equally weird, Marcus replied, approaching the table. I'm betting you've never actually treated a predator species before. Of course not, Dr. Quillick's voice cracked. My people evolved from small, ground-dwelling birds. We spent millions of years being hunted by creatures exactly like this. My great-grandfather was eaten by something that looked just like him. Marcus examined Fang's wounds with the same clinical detachment he'd use on any patient. The Vraxian's breathing was steady. His vital signs were stable, according to the medical readings, and despite his imposing appearance, he was clearly in pain and needed help. You know, Marcus said conversationally, back on Earth, I once had to perform surgery on a grizzly bear that had been shot by poachers. 800 pounds of muscle and teeth, and you know what the biggest challenge was? Getting him to take his antibiotics afterward. Bears are surprisingly picky about flavors. The medical staff stared at him like he'd just announced he regularly wrestled with supernovas for fun. Dr. Reed, Dr. Quillick said carefully, are you telling us that your species voluntarily interacts with apex predators? Well, we domesticated wolves about 15,000 years ago and turned them into golden retrievers, so yeah, I'd say we've got some experience. Fang's eyes opened again, this time focusing directly on Marcus. The rumbling sound got louder, and Marcus was pretty sure he was looking at the business end of a very unimpressed apex predator. Easy there, big guy, Marcus said, the same tone he'd use with an injured dog. Nobody here wants to hurt you, well, except maybe Dr. Quillex. But that's just because you're giving him flashbacks to his evolutionary trauma. Fang's ears twitched, and Marcus swore he saw something that might have been amusement in those yellow eyes, before the sedatives pulled him back under. He's going to be fine, Marcus announced to the room, but we're going to need to work fast, and I'm going to need all of you to stop acting like he's about to eat the entire station. But Dr. Reed, Nurse Pippin protested, what if he wakes up during surgery? What if he gets angry? What if he decides we look tasty? Marcus looked around the room at the collection of small, fluffy, and generally adorable alien medical professionals, then back at the unconscious Vraxian warrior. Then I guess we'll find out if bedside manner works on interstellar predators. Dr. Quillix, to his credit, managed to pull himself together enough to attempt a proper medical briefing. This involved him standing approximately 15 feet away from Fang, while gesturing wildly at a holographic display that showed detailed Vraxian anatomy. Now, as you can see from the anatomical projection, Quillix began, his voice only slightly hysterical, Vraxians have a complex cardiovascular system with 3 primary hearts, reinforced skeletal structure, and a nervous system that's… oh dear. The holographic display, which had been showing a nice, safe 2-dimensional medical diagram, suddenly glitched and projected a life-size 3-dimensional Vraxian head that materialized right in the middle of the room with its mouth open, showing rows of very impressive teeth. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Nurse Pippin shrieked and dove under a surgical table. 2 orderlies made breaks for the door and collided with each other in their panic. Dr. Keelik's feathers stood completely on end, making him look like he'd been struck by lightning, and he toppled backward over a medical cart. "Computer, end holographic display," Marcus called out, but the damage was already done. The hologram flickered and died, leaving behind a medical bay that looked like a small bomb had gone off. "This is exactly why we need hazard pay for predator patients," whimpered Technician Bloop, who had apparently emerged from the supply closet only to immediately regret that decision. Marcus looked around at the chaos and sighed. "Okay, let's try this again. But maybe we could use the 2-dimensional projections this time? I don't think anyone's heart can handle another 3-dimensional surprise." Dr. Quillex picked himself up off the floor, straightened his medical coat, and cleared his throat. "Right, yes, 2 dimensions, much safer. Now, the primary concern with Vraxian physiology is that their entire biology is designed for hunting and killing. Their muscle density is approximately 4 times that of standard humanoids. Their reflexes are enhanced by a secondary nervous system, and their jaw strength can crush most known metals." "That's fascinating," Marcus said, examining the real patient instead of the hologram. "What about pain tolerance, healing factors, drug sensitivities?" We don't actually know," Dr. Quillix admitted. "No one's ever been brave enough to conduct comprehensive medical studies on conscious Vraxians. Most of our data comes from archaeological remains and very theoretical xenobiology papers." Marcus stared at him. "You mean to tell me that the Vraxians have been members of the Galactic Medical Consortium for what, 50 years, and nobody's ever actually treated one?" There was that incident on Kepler Station about 20 years ago, Nurse Pippin offered helpfully. A Varaxian diplomat got food poisoning from eating incompatible alien cuisine. But they just waited for him to get better on his own, in quarantine, with armed guards. The quarantine was for everyone else's safety, Dr. Quillex added quickly. Nobody wanted to risk getting close enough to take his temperature. Marcus looked down at Fang, who chose that moment to shift slightly in his sleep and make a small wuffling sound that was probably completely innocent, but caused 3 more medical staff members to duck behind equipment. So let me get this straight, Marcus said slowly. The most advanced medical facility in this sector of the galaxy has never actually treated a predator species because everyone's too scared to get close enough to learn how? It's not fear. It's perfectly reasonable caution based on millions of years of evolutionary— It's fear, Marcus interrupted. And it's ridiculous. Look at him. He's unconscious, wounded, and probably in considerable pain. He's not some mythical monster. He's a patient. A patient with teeth that could bite through hull plating, Dr. Quillex muttered. So do medical bone saws, but I notice you're not afraid of those. Marcus turned to address the room. All right, here's what we're going to do. I need someone to prep the surgical bay, someone to get me a complete rundown of what medications we have that might work on Varaxian physiology, and someone to figure out why half of your medical equipment seems to be designed for creatures that would rather flee than fight. What do you mean? Asked Nurse Pippin. Marcus gestured at the medical restraints on the table. These are designed to prevent patients from running away, not to actually restrain something that might struggle. Your sedation protocols are calibrated for prey species stress responses, not predator biology, and your surgical tools are precise and delicate, which is great for species that don't have natural armor plating. Dr. Quillex blinked rapidly. But that's how medicine works. Patient cooperation is assumed. Violence is an aberration. Not where I come from, Marcus said. Where I come from, half of medicine is figuring out how to help something that's actively trying to bite you. Fang's ears twitched again, and Marcus could swear he saw the corner of the Varaxian's mouth curve upward slightly. Did he just smile? Technician Bloop whispered in horror. Either that, Marcus replied, or he's dreaming about whatever Varaxians consider funny. The thought of a predator species having a sense of humor seemed to disturb the medical staff almost as much as the teeth had. Marcus rolled up his sleeves and got to work, which apparently was a signal for the alien medical staff to collectively lose their minds all over again. Dr. Reed, you can't just approach him without proper safety protocols. Dr. Quillex squawked, but Marcus was already running his hands along Fang's flank, checking the extent of the energy burns with the same casual confidence he'd use examining a nervous horse. Safety protocols, Marcus muttered, gently probing around the shrapnel wound. Right. Nurse Pippin, I need you to hand me that biofield scanner, the one that looks like a silver wand. But sir, what if he wakes up? What if he attacks? Then I'll deal with it, just like I dealt with that Alterian bull that got loose in the agricultural sector last month. The comparison didn't seem to comfort anyone. Marcus began his examination in earnest, narrating his findings with the kind of deadpan commentary that had made him legendary among the station's human crew. Okay, so we've got second-degree energy burns across the lateral torso, consistent with plasma rifle fire. Somebody clearly doesn't like our friend Fang here. He moved to the shrapnel wound, gently parting the fur to get a better look. This is interesting. The shrapnel's lodged about 2 inches into the muscle, but it missed the major blood vessels. Lucky bastard. Although given the density of Varaxian muscle tissue, I'm betting this hurt like hell. Dr. Reed? Dr. Quillex called from his safe distance. Shouldn't we be using the automated surgical systems? They're designed to work without direct physical contact. Marcus looked up at him with the expression of someone who'd just been asked to perform brain surgery with a spoon. Quillex, your automated systems are calibrated for species that have the structural integrity of overcooked pasta. Look at this muscle density. He pressed his fingers against Fang's shoulder, and the alien medical staff collectively winced. This is like working with organic steel cable. Your gentle little robotic arms would be about as useful as trying to cut through armor plating with a butter knife. To demonstrate his point, Marcus grabbed one of the standard surgical instruments and tried to make a small incision. The scalpel barely scratched the surface of Fang's skin. See? This is why you need someone who's used to working with creatures that evolution actually designed to survive things. Marcus opened his own medical bag and pulled out a collection of instruments that made the alien medical staff take several steps backward. To their prey species sensibilities, his veterinary tools looked like medieval torture devices. This, he said, holding up a large, sturdy-looking scalpel, is designed for cutting through thick hide and dense muscle. And this, he showed them a set of what looked like industrial pliers, is for extracting foreign objects from uncooperative patients. Those look primitive, Nurse Pippin observed nervously. They look effective, Marcus corrected. Sometimes the old ways work best. Now, I'm going to need someone to monitor his vital signs while I work, and I mean actually monitor them, not just hide behind the equipment and hope for the best. Dr. Quillex reluctantly approached the monitoring station, staying as far from the patient as the equipment would allow. His heart rate is elevated but stable. Blood pressure is... well, I'm not entirely sure what normal blood pressure is for a Vraxian. We'll figure it out as we go, Marcus said, beginning to clean the energy burns with a solution that would have been far too harsh for most species but seemed appropriate for Fang's resilient hide. That's half the fun of xenobiology. Every patient teaches you something new. As he worked, Marcus kept up a running commentary that was equal parts medical instruction and psychological warfare against the staff's fears. The thing about predator species is that they're actually more straightforward than prey species. Prey animals are nervous, flighty, unpredictable. Predators? They're usually pretty direct about their intentions. If Fang wanted to hurt us, he'd have done it already. But what if the pain makes him aggressive? Technician Bloop asked. Then we'll deal with it. Pain responses are universal. You just have to know how to read them. Marcus began working on the shrapnel wound, his movements precise and confident. Back on Earth, I once had to remove a piece of fence wire from a wolf's leg. Wild animal, completely untamed, and scared out of his mind. You know what I did? Called animal control, Dr. Quillex suggested hopefully. I talked to him, calmly, steadily, while I worked, let him know I wasn't a threat, that I was there to help. Most intelligent species understand intent, even if they don't understand words. As if to prove his point, Marcus began speaking softly to the unconscious Vraxian. Easy there, big guy. I know this isn't comfortable, but we're going to get you fixed up. This shrapnel's got to come out, and it's going to hurt, but then you'll feel a lot better. The alien medical staff watched in fascination and horror as Marcus worked with the kind of calm efficiency that only comes from years of experience. He extracted the shrapnel with steady hands, cleaned and treated the wound, and began the delicate process of closing the injuries. The key, he explained while suturing, is to remember that pain and fear make every species act defensively. You approach with confidence but not aggression, firmness but not hostility. Most animals, even predators, can sense your intentions. But how do you know he won't attack when he wakes up? Nurse Pippin asked. Marcus paused in his work and looked at her seriously. I don't. But I also don't know that you won't have a panic attack and run into a wall. That's the thing about medicine. You work with the probabilities, not the certainties. And the probability is that Fang here is going to wake up, realize he feels better, and be grateful for the help. He finished the last suture and stepped back to examine his work. Besides, look at him. Really look. He's not some mindless killing machine. He's intelligent. He's hurt. And he's far from home. Right now, we're probably the closest thing he has to allies in this sector of space. Dr. Quillex ventured closer to look at the finished surgery. I have to admit, Dr. Reed, your work is quite impressive. But how did you know what techniques to use? Marcus cleaned his instruments with the same matter-of-fact efficiency he'd used during the surgery. Same way I learned to treat any species. You start with the basics, you adapt to what you're dealing with, and you remember that underneath all the claws and teeth and evolutionary differences, most problems have practical solutions. He looked around at the alien medical staff, who were staring at him with something approaching awe. The universe is full of dangerous things, but dangerous doesn't mean impossible to work with. It just means you have to be smarter about how you approach the problem. Fang stirred slightly, and everyone except Marcus immediately tensed. And sometimes, Marcus added with a slight smile, you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Fang's eyes opened slowly, the yellow irises focusing with the kind of predatory awareness that made every alien in the room simultaneously hold their breath. The Vraxian's head lifted slightly, taking in his surroundings with the methodical assessment of a creature that had survived by being very, very good at evaluating potential threats. The medical staff collectively took 3 steps backward. Marcus, who had been cleaning his instruments at the side table, turned around and made eye contact with the newly conscious apex predator. Morning, Sunshine. How are you feeling? Fang's response was a low rumble that vibrated through the deck plating and made Nurse Pippin make a small squeaking sound. That's either thank you for the excellent medical care, or I'm going to eat everyone in this room, Marcus observed conversationally. Let's hope it's the first one. The Vraxian tried to sit up, which was when he discovered the extent of his injuries. His lips pulled back in what was unmistakably a snarl of pain, revealing teeth that belonged in a museum of evolutionary engineering. Dr. Quillix made a sound like a deflating balloon, and actually climbed onto a chair. "Easy there," Marcus said, stepping closer instead of farther away, which caused the entire medical staff to make various noises of distress. "You've got some fresh sutures. I wouldn't recommend any sudden movements for at least a few hours." Fang's head swiveled toward Marcus, and for a moment the room was filled with the kind of tension that usually preceded someone getting eaten. The Vraxian's nostrils flared as he took in Marcus's scent. His ears twitched forward, and his yellow eyes narrowed with what could have been either interest or the prelude to violence. "Dr. Reed," Dr. Quillix whispered urgently, "perhaps you should maintain a safe distance." "Safe distance is relative," Marcus replied, reaching into his medical bag. "Right now, our friend here is trying to figure out if we're threats, allies, or lunch. The worst thing I can do is act like prey." He pulled out a small scanner and held it up so Fang could see it. "I'm going to check your vital signs, okay? This won't hurt, but it might beep a little." The Vraxian's eyes tracked the device, and Marcus could practically see him thinking. Here was a creature that had probably never been in a position of medical vulnerability before, surrounded by strangers who smelled like fear, with no idea what had happened to him or where he was. Marcus activated the scanner and began running it over Fang's torso. "Your heart rate's elevated, but that's normal for someone who just woke up in a strange place. Blood pressure's good, no signs of infection. All things considered, you're doing pretty well for someone who got shot multiple times." Fang made another rumbling sound, this one with a distinctly different tone. His ears, which had been pinned back, relaxed slightly. "Sounded almost conversational," Technician Bloop observed from behind his equipment cart. "Most predators are social," Marcus explained, still running the scanner. "They have to be able to communicate with their pack. The trick is learning to read the signals." As if to prove his point, Fang shifted his position slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his sutures. Marcus immediately noticed the signs of discomfort. "You're in pain," he said, "not a question but a statement. I can give you something for that, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" The Vraxian stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus got the distinct impression he was being evaluated in ways that had nothing to do with his medical credentials. Finally, Fang gave what could only be described as a very small nod. "Good. This is going to be a mild sedative, just enough to take the edge off. You'll stay conscious, but you should feel better." Marcus prepared the injection with the same calm efficiency he'd used during the surgery, but as he approached with the hypodermic, Fang's body tensed visibly. Every muscle coiled like a spring, and a warning growl rumbled from his chest. I know, Marcus said, completely unfazed. "Nobody likes needles, but this is the good stuff. Trust me." He administered the injection with practiced speed, and Fang's response was immediate and alarming. The Vraxian's head snapped around, jaws opening to reveal those impressive teeth, and for a moment it looked like Marcus was about to become the first human to be eaten in a medical bay. Instead, Marcus did something that made the entire alien medical staff question his sanity. He reached out and scratched behind Fang's ears. "Easy, big guy. I know it stings, but it's over now." The effect was instantaneous and completely unexpected. Fang's aggressive posture melted away, his eyes half closed, and that threatening growl turned into something that sounded suspiciously like a purr. Did he just..." Dr. Quillix stammered. "Yep," Marcus said, continuing the ear scratching. "Turns out apex predators have the same weak spots as most mammals. Who would have guessed?" The sedative was taking effect, and Fang was becoming noticeably more relaxed. His breathing deepened, his muscles loosened, and he actually leaned into Marcus's touch. "This is impossible," Nurse Pippin whispered. "He's supposed to be a killing machine." "He's a person," Marcus corrected, moving to scratch under Fang's chin. "A big, furry, heavily armed person, but still a person. Look at him. He's not some mindless monster. He's intelligent, he's hurt, and he's probably scared and confused." As if to prove the point, Fang made a soft wuffling sound and actually nuzzled Marcus's hand. "Oh, for crying out loud," Marcus muttered, but he was smiling. "You're just a big puppy, aren't you?" The Vraxian's tail, which had been rigid with tension, gave a small wag. The alien medical staff stared in complete silence as their most feared patient transformed from a terrifying apex predator into what appeared to be a very large, very content dog. "Dr. Reed," Dr. Quillix said slowly, "I think you may have just revolutionized interspecies medicine." "I think," Marcus replied, giving Fang one final scratch behind the ears. I may have just made a friend. Fang's response was another contented purr that vibrated through the medical bay and made everyone realize that maybe, just maybe, the universe's apex predators weren't so different from the rest of them after all. 3 weeks later, Marcus was back to his morning routine of terrible coffee and bureaucratic memos, but with one significant difference. His communicator now buzzed with requests for his expertise on a daily basis. Word had spread through the station's gossip network with the speed of light, and suddenly every department with an unusual patient wanted the human who could, apparently, tame apex predators with belly rubs. Dr. Reed, came the now familiar voice of Nurse Pippin. We have a code orange situation in docking bay 12. There's a Kandorian merchant who's refusing medical treatment because he's afraid of our equipment. Marcus looked up from his memo about proper procedures for interspecies pain management and sighed. Let me guess. The Kandorians are the ones who evolved from some kind of prey species. Herd animals, sir. Very skittish. They're afraid of anything that makes sudden movements or loud noises. So basically, they're scared of modern medicine. Yes, sir. Marcus saved his memo and stood up. Being the station's unofficial dangerous patient specialist had turned out to be more about psychology than medicine. Half the galaxy's species were afraid of something, and the other half were afraid of everything. His job had evolved from treating injuries to being a combination veterinarian, therapist, and diplomat. I'll be right there. Try not to let anyone stampede before I arrive. The Kandorian merchant turned out to be a 7-foot-tall creature covered in what looked like golden fur, with huge eyes and a nervous disposition that made him jump at every sound. He'd cut himself on some cargo containers and needed stitches, but he was absolutely terrified of the medical bay's automated systems. Marcus treated him the same way he'd treated every nervous animal he'd ever encountered, with patience, calm movements, and a running commentary that explained exactly what he was doing and why. 20 minutes later, the merchant was patched up and actually seemed disappointed to leave. You know, Dr. Quillix observed, watching the Kandorian depart, I'm starting to think that our medical training might have been somewhat incomplete. Just a little, Marcus agreed. When you design a medical system around the assumption that all patients will be cooperative and rational, you tend to miss out on the fact that pain and fear make everyone act irrationally. His communicator buzzed again. Dr. Reed, we have a situation in Cargo Bay 7. A Zephyrian diplomat's pet has escaped and is causing a disturbance. Marcus looked at Dr. Quillix, who was already shaking his head. I'll handle the medical emergencies, Quillix said. You deal with anything that has teeth. Fair enough. The pet turned out to be a creature that looked like a cross between a house cat and a small dragon, about the size of a golden retriever, but with wings, scales, and a tendency to breathe small puffs of flame when agitated. It had apparently escaped from its containment unit and was now perched on top of a cargo container, hissing at anyone who came too close. The cargo bay was filled with panicked workers and at least 3 security officers who were treating the situation like a terrorist attack. Has anyone tried just talking to it? Marcus asked. Talking to it? Security Chief Vortex looked at him like he'd suggested negotiating with a supernova. Dr. Reed, that creature is a Class Key fire hazard. It's also scared, confused, and probably hungry, Marcus replied, pulling a protein bar from his pocket. Sometimes the direct approach works best. He walked up to the cargo container and looked up at the little dragon cat, which was eyeing him with the kind of suspicion that suggested it had been chased around the cargo bay for the better part of an hour. Hey there, little guy. You're having a rough day, aren't you? The creature tilted its head and made a sound that was somewhere between a chirp and a growl. Marcus held up the protein bar. I bet you're hungry. It's probably been a while since anyone thought to feed you properly. He tossed the bar onto the container, and the little dragon cat pounced on it with enthusiasm. While it was eating, Marcus climbed up onto the container and sat down next to it. There we go. Much better when you're not running on an empty stomach. The creature finished the protein bar and looked at him expectantly. Marcus scratched behind its ears, and it immediately began purring, a sound that was complicated by the fact that it was still producing small puffs of flame. And that, Marcus announced to the assembled crowd, is how you handle a Class C fire hazard. 20 minutes later, he was back in his office, updating his incident report and wondering if he should start charging extra for animal psychology consultations. His communicator buzzed one more time. Dr. Reed, we have an emergency in Medical Bay 7. It's a Terran houseplant that seems to be reacting badly to the station's atmosphere, and the botanical team is convinced it's going to wither and die. Marcus stared at his communicator for a long moment. A houseplant. Yes, sir. They're very concerned about its well-being. It's a plant, Pippin. From Earth. I'm pretty sure it's not going to attack anyone. But sir, you're our expert on dangerous Earth creatures. Marcus looked out his office window at the stars beyond, thinking about a galaxy full of species that had spent so long avoiding anything that might hurt them that they'd forgotten how to deal with the basic challenges of living in a dangerous universe. Then he thought about Fang, who had recovered completely and was now working as a security consultant for the station, mainly because his presence in the corridors had reduced petty crime to practically zero. "I'll be right there," he said. "Try not to let anyone panic over the geranium." As he headed for the door, Marcus couldn't help but smile. 3 years ago, he'd been a small-town veterinarian who'd never imagined leaving Earth. Now he was the galaxy's go-to expert on anything that the universe's prey species found too scary to handle. Which, it turned out, was pretty much everything. He grabbed his medical bag and headed out to save the galaxy from the terrifying threat of houseplant ownership, wondering what crisis would be waiting for him tomorrow. Knowing his luck, it would probably be something actually dangerous. But then again, dangerous was just another word for interesting, and Marcus Reed had never been one to back down from an interesting challenge.